Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
The human component of supply chain is just as powerful as any system or any process. That's the magic. And I'm finding that you talk about the pandemic, that softened, just from a human perspective, it softened a lot of people, and they're bringing that into the workplace now, right? Before the pandemic, it wasn't, so I think we had to tap into that relationship piece and figure out, we have to extend and really kind of create the value through the lens of the audience.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. As part of our March celebration of women in supply chain, Nanad and I are excited to welcome our friend Kinta Gates, Vice President of Supply Chain and Operations at Glossier. Kinta leads Glossier's global operations and supply chain strategies. With a career spanning several key roles in the beauty and food industries, Kinta has established herself as a leader in operational excellence, strategic planning, and DEI initiatives. Before Glossier, Kinta made significant contributions at Thrive Cosmetics as a senior director, where she excelled in enhancing supply chain operations and implementing strategic DEI plans. Kinta has been recognized for her leadership in DEI, being honored by the Positive Results Corporation and named one of the 50 phenomenal Black women engineers by the LA Council of Black Professional Engineers. Kinta, it is our absolute pleasure to have you join us today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, my friends. I have been looking forward to this conversation, so very, very glad to join you here today.
Yeah, I just got to add, having Kinta on the podcast, like, we have been trying to make this happen for a while.
Oh gosh,
we have. We've literally been trying for at least the last 3 or 4 months to just align schedules to make this happen. And I'm so glad that you're here, because the vantage and perspective that you bring to the table, I think this episode's going to be phenomenal. I'm really looking forward to it.
Excited. Yes, we were playing a bit of schedule tag, trying to situate ourselves, but here now and excited to dive in.
Amazing. Well, Kinta, I personally love your story and experience in the logistics space. I've personally been able to learn and see it in action over the past year. And my introduction, I think, only scratches the surface. So would love if you could share with our listeners your journey, which started as an inventory analyst, to your current role at Glossier.
Yes. Let me caveat this by saying it was not an intentional choice. The way that I find myself in supply chain is very interesting. So while in college, pursuing my engineering degree at NC State, shout out to NC State Wolfpack, I took advantage of their co-op program. And so that allowed me to have several rotations at a company, Nortel Network. So I actually started in telecom. So I've bounced in and out of beauty. There's a story there.
Did you just say Nortel Networks?
I absolutely did.
I still have their stocks sitting on negative balance in my account. Anyways.
Let's stay focused, Manad. But I did. I started my career with Nortel and started in the traditional IE group. So the IE group that was at one of the manufacturing facilities in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. And so I did a couple of rotations, got deep into time studies, really, out on the floor, on the manufacturing floor, did some capacity planning. And after the second rotation, I was like, okay, this is nice, but this is not for me. And so when I went back for a session over the summer, they actually placed me in the inventory control group. And so that was kind of my first introduction. I had taken, obviously, some coursework in supply chain, but the real tangible kind of experience I got. And then I was like, okay, I think I found my home. This is nice. And so I was just really immersed myself in all things inventory. Eventually was hired right after college to work on that team. While still at Nortel, um, across the plant from where we sat, there was this team that there was always something going. They always had food. They always were celebrating. And I'm like, who is that team? And it was the supply chain management team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found my way across the plant and just kind of started hanging out in their pod just to understand like what do y'all have going on over here? And so as we kind of, did some projects and things together, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. But then 2008 bubble burst, layoffs, the whole nine. And then that's when I found my way into beauty for the first time with the body shop. So that was my introduction into demand planning. And so I worked as a forecast analyst for them. That was my introduction to beauty, introduction to retail. Fascinating company. Hate to see some of the headlines that I'm seeing now around the company because really enjoyed my time there. So I was there, and then I ended up back in telecom. I went to Cisco, stayed there for a bit, did some work in nonprofit. I ended up relocating to Atlanta, where I spent 3 years there. I worked for Comcast for a bit, so I did some more kind of telecom cable, and then got into aftermarket auto. But still, so at that point, so I'd done inventory analyst work, I'd done demand planning work, then I got into procurement and buying. So there's a method to my madness here. And so I picked up that experience, and then actually that was after 3 years relocated again to LA, where I've been now for 13 years. Got back into beauty. So I did 2 more stints in beauty here, but really situated myself back into the inventory management space, kind of tapping back into my roots that really kind of started me on the supply chain journey without me actually really knowing that's what I was doing. And so that's why I played really at Murad, at the startup that I worked at here. And that's what set me up for the time that I had at Mars. And I would say if there was an inflection point in my career, it was my time at Mars. I found a lot of synergy between beauty and food, but the structure and the way that they value supply chain and operations at Mars really, I would say it caused me to really reflect on what I want to do next, and the possibilities seemed endless because of, I would say, the training and my time there. So I attribute a lot of the success that I've had since that point to my time at Mars and the leadership that I sat under, the experience that I gained there. And then Mars relocated their office to Chicago. I certainly did not move to LA to move to Chicago. I love Chicago, but the winters, I'm not really sure that I can handle that. And so then I took some time off, and then went back into beauty. So I landed my role with Thrive Cosmetics. I think definitely there was a build from kind of the community engagement aspect of my role at Mars, where there I actually ran the operations planning group for North America. But at Thrive, I was able to kind of carry that same energy, which is how I got into the DEI work, even though I was running supply chain, and really help build the supply chain from the ground up for Thrive. And so I would say my journey, absent leadership, really, I pride myself in having sat in this seat for a lot of the functions that I oversee. And that's very important to me as a leader, particularly in supply chain. So Then obviously from Thrive, now with Glossier, where I'm overseeing about 8 different functions for the company, most of which, like I said, I actually have experience doing the actual work, which I hope my team would say is a benefit to having a leader that's actually done the work. So I've had kind of a windy road along that road. I picked up 2 more degrees that have nothing to do with supply chain directly. But I've been able to incorporate that into the leadership aspect of supply chain. So another degree in legal studies, which the contract and negotiation piece, I've been obviously able to leverage that. And then my master's degree in strategic communications with an emphasis on corporate social responsibility. I've been able to really leverage that as well.
Oh, you know what's so beautiful about this is like you're hitting on a point that I actually firmly believe in, and I'm definitely biased because we work in this space, right? But there is a lot of like, except for like being a doctor, you got to study and you got to
Right,
practice, right? Being a
right.
lawyer, you got to study, you got to practice, being an engineer, you got to do that. But some of these other fields where, as an example, I don't have a supply chain degree. But
Mm-hmm.
what I do have is a lot of experience in supply chain. And I think that to be a good leader in supply chain, you have had to have the time put in. Like you got to pay your dues. You can't
Yes.
just graduate and aspire to be a chief supply chain officer of a company in 4 years. And you can do that as a chief marketing officer, or you can do that as, again, a lot of other roles that you can truly aspire to get into leadership. But this is so nuanced that if you haven't gone to war and you haven't seen some of this action, you're going to be non-functional. And the talent you acquire as well, right? So
100%, 100%. There's so much value, particularly, like you said, I love how you framed it up, like when you have to go to war, which is like, that's a real thing for supply chain professionals, right? And so there's so much value in knowing what that feels like from both sides, right? From being within the working team and being a functional leader of an organization. There's so much value in that.
and it's a topic for later in the podcast because I do want to discuss this, but like brands that go from 0 to 1 and then the 1 to 100 and the type of leadership that you require, right? And the thread that you touched on is how Mars changed you, right? Like and give you a perspective of like rigidity, but with like how network planning and how the entire design of supply chain actually executes like a machine. It is so imperative that companies that are looking at growth right now bring in talent and leadership from those established organizations, but have flexibility to say, hey, be flexible, but bring in good practices, right? And it's like it teaches you so much. Even in my career, I worked with a lot of brands and small companies, but at the end of the day, most of my learnings was my time when I spent at Target or Canadian Tire or any of these organizations is where I truly learned. And then it's a lot of fun applying that very uniquely to smaller organizations.
100%. And that can be challenging too. Um, Kind of how to position, I would say the bigger experiences, right, in kind of the well-established brands or companies, and how that translates, right, to a startup, right? You don't have the systems, you don't have the structure, right? There's a self-awareness that is required because there's like a delicate dance. I know I can push, but so far I don't want to get frustrated because now I'm a senior director or what have you doing data entry, right? But I think at the same time, I think the beauty of um, people who work in supply chain is that we're so ready for whatever moment you throw at us, right? We know how to build. It's so important to have a builder's mindset. It's something that I know my team hears me say all the time, but it's so true. You can have the blueprint in front of you, but you have to appreciate the learnings that you're getting day after day and have the ability to be able to adjust, but still meet the mark, right? That there's just something just so beautiful. And I think to your point, I know I've been in a lot of the publications that I've been reading. We're finding a trend where chief supply chain officers are the ones they're being tapped for CEO positions now.
Yes.
100%.
100%.
Right? I think that is so beautiful because people are actually understanding the true value, right, of having someone who has that lens of operations at the helm of an entire. I'm glad we're here.
You know
I'm glad
what?
we're here.
The one good thing that came out of pandemic actually was it highlighted how important we are, right? Until then, we were just the machine behind the scenes that just made shit happen. Sorry to say, but
That's it. Yes, I was going to go there, but since you set me up, let's go for it now. For all of the terrible things, right, that happened during that stretch of time, one thing that from the seat of supply chain is that supply chain became sexy. Let's just put it out there for what it is. People actually understand. I love the fact that my family members actually know what I do now.
Exactly.
It took a whole pandemic for that to happen. But as soon as they could not receive the thing that they wanted, they were like, oh, I was like, well, this is actually what I do for a living. Let me break this down for you, right? So now I've become the cool family member. But it's so true. It's so true. There's a greater appreciation for the work behind the scenes. And I dare say that time period has allowed leaders to, or I would say provoked leaders to go back and think about where they're actually inserting their operational leadership. We're not just here to fix problems, right? We're not just here to clean up decisions that were made absent operational input. We're at the front of the conversation now where we're at our best, right? We're not just here to say no, right? It may be a no, not now, but we're here to enhance everything that you're bringing to the table. We really are. One of my team members framed it so beautifully. We're the transformational engine of any company. So if you want to do it well or do it better, we have to have a seat at the table. It's a must.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
I love that, Kinta. And I love a lot of the analogies that were just used. So I'm going to use one here. So we talked about war. I want to talk about a battle that's going on in the war today. And it's happening a little upstream from supply chain. And it has to do with the changes that are going on at Meta and Apple and Google, where customer acquisition costs are a large multiple more than they used to be. And I recently just read that I think in the health and beauty space, Shopify published this not too long ago, where they have CAC, customer acquisition costs, at about $130, which is leaps and bounds from where it used to be. But what that means to any organization is that there's less cash or funding available to support all the different departments and areas of the business. So knowing that that's where we are today, and we'll find, there's smart people that will find a way to market and advertising other ways and in other channels. But I'd love your perspective on how that is impacting supply chains. I mean, it's like we're used to doing more with less, but now organizationally there's just less because you have to spend more to acquire the customer. And then the importance of supply chain, in my opinion, is actually tripled because you need to get that long-term value, that LTV. If you're spending $130 per customer acquisition, your supply chain and delivering operational and that customer experience has to be top of mind to make sure they buy 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 more times. So would love your thoughts on how that's changing. What do you have to do? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think a couple of different things. I think this very well connects to the conversation we were just having about leadership. What I'm finding is that mature organizations or mature businesses, and by mature, I just mean like you've been here for a while, right? The first place that they're going to kind of cut budgets is not supply chain because they understand the value, right? And obviously that's very much appreciated. I think we're working with kind of a double-edged sword here because to your point, we're accustomed to, and everyone has figured this out, they know that we can do more with less. But our point of leverage is this. Within a supply chain and operations organization, you have the two extensions that reach to the customer. You have product operations, the actual making of the product, and you have fulfillment, which actually gets the product to the customer, right? And so to me, it's a both and, it's not an either or. When you're having the conversation about how are we going to get creative now that there's a rise in CAC, at the same time, how are we preserving the customer experience, right? There's no decision ever that you want to make that's going to compromise the customer experience, right? And the weight and the execution of that rest within supply chain and operations. So that's why I'm saying, like, full circle moment. Mature organizations get that because there's been time enough for supply chain to demonstrate the value, right? I think this impacts for a myriad of reasons. Less mature organizations that's where kind of the rub and the struggle is. Perhaps there are trade-offs, right? But at the end of the day, who's going to be compromised? More often than not, it may be the customer experience.
This is very true. And to that conversation about mature and not so mature, I don't want to call them immature, but like there, one of the differences also happens to be when the going was good, right? Like, so when the going was good, you got high value products, you have, good margins sitting within, right? The inefficiencies in supply chain were not as glaring, right? So there is this side to where the leadership is actually saying, hey, the going's not so good.
Tighten it a little more.
Let's tighten that nut a little bit more and find efficiencies. And it's going to show you where there is good leadership and where there is not, right? Where there is opportunity for talent and there is opportunity for systems and there is opportunity for, network optimization, renegotiations with 3PLs, doing a whole bunch of like procurement exercises, et cetera, that you got to go through. But it's coming out of that. And there is, there is some good work going on in the industry as we observe right now, and the pressure's really there right now. The pressure's really there as a lot of companies are looking to figure this one out, how to best utilize their supply chain.
100%, 100%. And I know we'll probably get to it, but that piece around systems, with the advancement in technology, with AI, like what are we going to do, right? With AI, how can we best utilize that? I think this is the time to flex that way, right? We've gained, stabilization across the supply chain, recovering from, right, the pandemic era. But now, how do we get better? If we've gone from good to better, how do we get from better to best, right? And for me, it's systems. It's working smarter. It's not working harder. It's actually allowing the talent that we have to be maximized so that we're removing repetitive tasks. We're removing their having to go in and sanitize all the data. Like, let them just use their brilliant mind to assess what's in front of them because we have the correct systems in place to actually deploy that for them. So that's where I'm circling. I'm circling systems big time.
So help me out. So what are you most excited about? So you just mentioned AI, you just mentioned supply chain AI, right? And the system side of things. I see like at a high level, everyone talks about demand planning, and you have had, you've spent some time doing demand planning, right? Like, how do you see the universe change from here? More from everyone talks about chat GPT, the conversational side, but there is like in AI, the machine learning, the algorithmic outlook. How do you see, where do you see in the supply chain having the most impact with the technological advancement we have seen over the last 5 years, as an example?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's actually it's the bringing together of the data. So we have the demand plan. We know that. We've got our supply plan. We've translated that. We have our point of sale data. We've done. But now what do we do with that? What are we actually, how are we bringing that together in such a way that a CFO, a chief commercial officer, chief supply chain officer can take this same data set, see it three different ways, but come out with an outcome that is best for the business, that takes all of the different points of view and just brings it together. I'm searching for that. Because there's a lot of time that's being spent into, okay, we've got to get the forecast has to be accurate. Why? Because we've got to translate that and that's impacting our supply position. Okay, but what's actually happening in the marketplace and how am I, right? AI, predictive modeling, machine learning. There's got to be a way to be able to bring all of that together in a meaningful way in one space that allows us to just make the best decisions. Right? That is what I'm excited about. I'm excited about finding that platform, that application, that system that's not going to require like a whole team to maintain it, but just in a very smart way, bring all of those data points together that allows us to say, yep, I see how this is performing. Okay. Right? So that we become responsive and not reactive.
Exactly.
That's it. That's what I'm excited about.
And it's not like $2 million and or $5 million and 2 years of implementation time for like a rigid system that promises to give you this. It's about the data exists. Let me point you where it is. Figure it out, right? Like, and that's what AI's promise happens to be, right? Like,
Right.
come give me the insights that I need without me having to structure my data or anything. Here's my supply plan. Here's my demand plan. Here's my point sale. Let's go, right?
That's
And
it.
give me the insight that I need. And I think
Yes.
anyone listening, any young startups that are thinking about what should they do, here's an idea.
Here's
Exactly.
an idea. Come talk to me. I'm ready. I'm ready to vet it out. Yeah.
That is beautiful. And I want to kind of pivot on to, and we already touched on this subject around leadership, right? Like the CEO, the CFOs, etc. of these companies. That 0 to 1 phase of any brand, right? You see the leadership. Their lean usually is like, let's go 3PL. I source a bunch of stuff. I got a really good manufacturer for whatever it is, right? It could be outside of the cosmetic space. At the end of the day, I'm going to source it. I'm going to find a 3PL. I'm going to push it in there. I'm going to focus on marketing and branding. And I'm going to, go out there and actually make my company really successful. And that's what's exactly required. And you push your supply chain to a 3PL as an example. And the 3PL does a great job. But you start scaling. I noticed the amount of leaders outside of the supply chain leadership that don't really understand supply chain, right? The level of education around supply chain in executive leadership
Yes.
is not really good. At least, in the brand space, maybe, the larger brands, it's a different, or larger CPG type organization, Mars, etc. It might be a different conversation. But in a lot of places, we don't see that. And are you seeing that change now that there is the previous conversation, there is a highlight on supply chain?
100%. And I think so. Again, I'm looking at this through two lenses. I think there is a responsibility of the brand to want to be educated, but I think that we hold the responsibility, sitting in the seat, understanding, right? Again, the heartbeat, the transformational engine. It requires us to know all facets of the business, right? And so I think it behooves operational leadership to go to our executive partners and say, look, I love this plan. Let me operationalize that in a way that actually enhances this. We have to show value, right? If I know that dollars and cents matters to my finance team, then my pitch to them is going to be in dollars and cents, right? If I know that the customer experience is what really matters to my marketing team, my pitch to them is going to be around this, and I'm going to pull in dollars and cents, right? There's just a way. I think it all boils down to relationships. Relationships really matter. There's no more siloed leadership. It's just not, right? We all have to stack hands and really appreciate that just because if I wasn't a supply chain leader, if I was a finance leader, if maybe I have an idea, what about this, right? And bounce that off, right? And not be offended. It's not a competition. It's not, trust me, I'm the biggest competitor there is, but it's not a competition. I think we're seeing that now. The walls have come down, and there's a responsibility for us to position ourselves, posture ourselves to be educated, but position ourselves to educate. We have to. And I think it's not, oh, well, let me put this train. It's in the moment. And to like the theme, kind of like the through line to what we're adding value. How can I add value to this conversation at the same time I'm going to educate? Because in the end, I know that there's something that I'm coming back to the table with, but they really need to kind of close this gap to understand before I spend a lot of time doing that, I would say across the company, and it's good, it's fruitful, right? You build camaraderie, right? It doesn't have to feel like, oh, I'm teaching you. Absolutely not. You treat it just like any other relationship. How can I add value? How can I advance us forward? Oh, okay, well, if this person actually knew this, they understood the competitive advantage of having a resilient supply chain. So how can I make that live in their world? Right? It's the flexibility. We have that. We have to have that as supply chain professionals. I think that we just have to tap into, right? Release some of the technical, everything and really dig into the people aspect. The human component of supply chain is just as powerful as any system or any process.
I agree.
And I think that's the magic. That's it. And I'm finding that we talk about, kind of the pandemic that softened a lot of, just from a human perspective, it softened a lot of people, and they're bringing that into the workplace now, right? Before the
So
pandemic,
beautiful.
it wasn't, so I think we had to tap into that relationship piece and figure out we have to extend and really kind of create the value through the lens of the audience.
Makes so much sense. And just I wanna pull from my past a little bit, right? And maybe just like while you were talking, thinking about, so there is this bottom up approach that I've kind of taken. Being a systems guy, I would, my job was, maintaining a warehouse or, the systems that ran the warehouse. Every analyst or even a developer that we would bring on board in multiple of roles that I've done in the past, one of the things we did was like the first 2 weeks after your HR onboarding was actually working on the warehouse floor. We would assign it to a different supervisor. You're a software developer that actually goes through what does it take to work a 8-hour shift doing receiving, picking, packing, shipping, and guess what happens? Then you're not going to come back to me and tell me, why am I fixing this thing? Why can't that user just press this 17 times in a day? And it's like, it's 17 times every time they want to do something, and it's 100 times while they are working in that environment for you to understand and have the empathy for what it takes to make it happen. And like, you translate that to a more top-down approach, right? Like if at least that's what I did. Can we do a little bit of like bottom-up approach to say, hey, the C-suite, can we spend a little bit of time in an inventory analyst position to actually understand what it actually takes to do this? Or a receiving clerk's position to understand what they have to go through on a daily basis to understand this? I think and it's not just supply chain, right? Like, people should be doing other functions as well. Supply chain folks should be learning other parts to have empathy, right? Like, that's where collaboration comes in from.
Absolutely. The leaders that I hire on my team, I ask them to go take a shift at one of our stores. If they live in the city where one of our own stores is, go to the store. I want you to be on the floor, greet the customers, work with our retail editors, go in the back of house so that you can actually see, because as you're planning shipments and things, to understand exactly what has to happen for this stock to, I think it's imperative. I love that you require that, and I think that that's key for fulfillment, because a lot of times we find ourselves maybe like there's a constraint here. Oh, what's happening in fulfillment? People don't really understand. They think that if I initiate a transfer request, then why can't it just be ready to ship tomorrow? They don't understand the picking and the packing, right? And you can put a nice flow together,
Yeah,
and it's not real until you're actually on that floor and you see, oh, this actually there's a person, the human aspect again, there's a person that actually has to go, and they have to get on the forklift, okay, and then pull this down, and then this has to. And so now you understand why there's a 10-day cycle time for this, or 15, or 5, whatever it is, right?
exactly.
Again, I think that is, so we know the process, we know this, we have to enter more of the people piece of supply chain. There's so much power there.
I agree. Love it.
I'm glad you brought up retail, Kinta, because if we tie a bow around some of this conversation, we've talked about cost pressures with CAC and the need for an increased LTV. We've talked about systems, technology, leadership, people. But the other avenue or area we want to explore and get your feedback and thoughts on is the expansion of sales channels. And we've seen a lot of digital native brands enter into the physical retail side, and that adds complexity to everything we just talked about. And wanted to get, if you could maybe discuss any lessons learned or any advice that you have for brands that are looking to do the physical retail expansion and how that impacts those in the supply chain world.
Absolutely. I think, so obviously, let me see, when was it? Last February. It's been a year since we launched in Sephora. So really stepping into the full omni-channel, right, business model, going from traditional D2C to now omni-channel. A quick piece of advice, don't try to do it blindly. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of people who have, launched in a Sephora or, an Ulta, wherever, right? Who have done it before. Lean on those lessons learned so that you don't have to feel the same pain. I think that's an easy win right there. The same thing with actually opening a physical retail space. It's not the first store. The way that and the experience inside of the store may be like, you're trying to create something new, but plenty of people have opened stores. Lean on the learnings, because I find that sometimes people get so caught up in, we've got to do this differently, that they forget the foundation is that this has been done before. The outcome can be different, but just to actually even get there, this has been done before. Lean on that. I think that's key. As it relates to kind of the other side of the launch or the opening, I think, look, leave space. So there's always kind of this optimism. Oh, well, I don't really know. Is it going to leave space for it to absolutely rock your world? Leave space for this to absolutely disrupt your supply chain, for this to absolutely make you go back to the table and say, okay, we were planning for the year to end like this, and this represents so much % of our business, but I don't know. Now, leave space for that. Open up your mind to that so that when it happens, which is a good thing, obviously it's a nightmare of a supply chain because it's like, wait a minute, now I've got to scramble and try to get this inventory here, but leave space for it, right? Don't dismiss the possibility of that extreme outcome. Because then now you're not coming from a place of, let me react. There is some reaction, but I've already thought this through and thought about what levers I may have to pull in the case that we thought we were going to land here and we actually land here. What does that mean? So that then you can make decisions from a place of, I already have at least this blueprint. And I'm not just sitting here just scrambling, right? I see that happen, not just in the beauty, just across the board in retail in general, new partnerships, just people don't leave the space for it to absolutely erupt.
Kinta, so well said, because we observe this in the market ourselves, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm a direct-to-consumer brand. I have cost pressures right now. Market's down. So I'm going to open up a B2B channel. That's like usually the first lean in, right? Like retail is kind of the step after to say, I'm going to create a footprint. And so that B2B, it's like, I already ship units and, units to people's houses. I can just like ship that stuff to B2B when a Walmart or a Target or a Costco or a Sephora or a whoever. I don't think there is a realization of how different shipping cases versus units happen to be. And by the way, all things being equal, shipping units is much harder than shipping cases. But if you're already shipping units and now you need to get into shipping cases, and for folks that are even thinking about this, one word you want to remember is retail compliance, because that chargeback's going to kill you. So
that's a whole different. We can spend a whole hour talking about chargeback.
Yeah,
right. And you need to be able to understand what that happens to be and be able to work your supply chain appropriately. To your point, leave space. And something you touched on, please don't reinvent the wheel. This has been done. This has been done n number of times. We are not trying to build the next Google or Uber. Supply chains have been around for a while. You just don't know this aspect of supply chain. You just need to bring the right talent, right people.
Talent. That's it.
And execute upon a plan, but a good plan.
That's it.
Just, yeah.
That's it. We make it sound so simple.
Yeah. This is true. This is true.
Kinta, this is, I can't believe we're at time. The conversation was absolutely amazing. We're going to have to do this again.
Yes,
and
please.
Just want to really, really thank you for joining us today. I want to give you the opportunity to share with the listeners what's the best social platform to follow you. Everyone knows where to go and purchase Glossier product,
yes,
whether that's at Sephora, online, retail stores. So go buy your. Listen, I have 3 girls, and you don't have to ask us to purchase anymore. It comes pretty frequently. So, but I want everyone to be able to, whether it's LinkedIn or any other social networks where they could go to follow you.
Absolutely. LinkedIn is best. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Some people, it's like, oh, follow me, and then they never follow up. Listen, send me messages. I know I'm probably like, oh, Kenta, you probably shouldn't have said that, but I am. I'm very active. I love to engage. I love to learn. I'm a lifelong nerd. That's the way my son frames it up. But I love to learn and engage and just host conversations and let's talk, let's connect. So Kenta C. Gates on LinkedIn, that's the best place to connect with me. And then of course from there, if you're local here in LA, we can grab coffee and things of that nature. But that's the best place to find me, LinkedIn.
Beautiful.
Kenta, it was a pleasure, and we definitely need to do this again because I don't
Absolutely.
even think I covered half of it. So, yeah.
Part 2 coming soon then.
Yes, part 2 coming soon.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you, Kenta.
This has been
Thank
a
you.
delight.
Hi, I'm Ninad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ, and I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the Ecom Logistics podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the Ecom Logistics podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the Ecom Logistics podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference in logistics together.